Along with all the other responsibilities of parenthood, moms often look to inspire their kids to start reading books. But one woman realized that busy mothers themselves could use some encouragement to pick up and read books of their own. That is the founding principle of her increasingly popular podcast, which has featured more than 300 authors, including 83 New York Times bestsellers, and with a title that says it all.
Hey, I'm Zibby Owens. I'm the creator and host of the podcast Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books.
You heard correctly. Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books, a podcast led by this mother of four.
I use the book. It's like, look at all the,
dog-eared pages.
I dog-ear all the pages. And
proving otherwise.
That's a catchy title, but moms are finding time to read books?
Moms do find time to read books. Sometimes. A lot of moms said, oh my gosh, you've inspired me to read again. There's just so much else competing for our time and attention. But there's something about reading that's so fundamental to being human.
It certainly is for Zibby Owens, and always has been. A lover of books and their authors, even as a kid, which led to a unique list of childhood idols.
When I was a little girl, I used to write letters. My mom would help me go to the back of the books and find the publisher address, and I would write letters to the author, and she would mail them for me. When I was 11 years old, I went to the plaza for tea with this author who shares a name with me, Zibby O'Neill.
Fan mail wasn't all that Owens wrote.
I've been writing my whole life since I was 9 years old, and my grandfather published a little miniature book of my stories. I published an essay in 17 when I was 16 years old. I love writing. I've written several books that have not been published, one book that I co-wrote that was published. I love to write.
What do you
I
love
do it all
about
the
it?
time.
Yeah.
Writing is how I sort out the craziness in my mind. The essays that I write, I know can help other people. I lost my best friend over 9/11. She was my college roommate and best friend, and I immediately wrote about it for my business school paper. And I remember my classmates saying, like, how could you do that? You just put yourself out there. Like, it didn't even occur to me not to write that. But I think that the things that I like to share are things that everybody is thinking and feeling.
Which brings us back to the podcast.
How is food medicine?
Oh, I'm obsessed. I do think food is medicine.
The title was originally pegged for a compilation of essays on parenting, but a friend and fellow author nudged Owens in a different direction.
She said, you should start a podcast. And I was like, what's a podcast?
You didn't even know what a podcast was?
Not really. I literally went home, and my husband Kyle and I sat on the couch, and we were like, where is the podcast button? How do you even get podcasts? I don't understand what this is. So we found the podcast button. I started listening to a lot of other ones. I Googled everything. Turns out it was going to be really easy, not expensive, low risk. So I thought, I don't know, I guess I'll try it.
Owens turned to the familiar for the focus of her podcast, books.
Thanks so much for coming on Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books.
More specifically, authors.
I've had on a range of authors from Anne Lamott, Meg Wolitzer, Jennifer Weiner, Evangeline Lilly, who wrote a children's book series and was on Lost. So, Dad,
She's even had her own father as a guest, billionaire Stephen Schwarzman, who runs the world's largest private equity firm.
Hi, Zippy. How are you? Andre.
Hi, thanks so much for doing this. One of the first people I interviewed was Andre Agassi, who wrote the book Open, which was one of my favorite books.
You weren't, at this point, an experienced podcaster.
No, I didn't know what I was doing. But again, I was just trying to talk to him. I really had things I wanted to know about him and tennis and his life and the writing. I did it on the phone, but I was drenched in sweat, like so nervous asking him all these questions. How did you find coaching versus playing?
It was interesting. It's when I played, I never felt pressure at all. It was never about pressure. I felt stressed.
I remember running downstairs after and being like, I did it!
Almost 2 years later, Owens has hundreds of podcasts under her belt. She now tapes most of her interviews in this home library studio, helping create a comfortable and intimate space.
There are a lot of book podcasts out there. There are a lot of people doing interviews out there. What's different about your podcast?
I'm not afraid to ask about what I really want to know. I'm legitimately interested, which I think people can tell. I'm get really excited and I'm passionate about it.
Yeah.
Her podcast guests would agree, but say that's not all.
I mean, first of all, I love the name of her podcast because it's kind of counterintuitive. Like, moms don't have time to read, and yet
You're listening to the podcast and you're going to read.
And hopefully you're going to read the book.
Tiffany Schlane is the author of 24/6, a book about taking a break from technology.
Zibby is super curious and interested and passionate. And I think you can see it in everything she does.
Michelle Philgate's the editor of What My Mother and I Don't Talk About.
I had been hearing about her podcast for a while and was so excited when she invited me to be on.
Why?
Because she's someone who is a real literary citizen. She connects readers with writers.
From book fairs to live author events, Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books has built an offline community to go along with its online footprint.
Her podcast is crucial for allowing for curation in an age where we are inundated with books.
For Owens, it's even more than that. After her divorce, she says reading and her podcast became another type of therapy.
I went from full-time mom to suddenly having these blocks of times without my kids, which was really painful for me and a very hard adjustment. And I had this therapist once who said, you know, if you have a book, you'll never be lonely. And I wasn't lonely. I had my husband and lots of friends, and I'm very lucky in my family, but it's really hard. So being able to have something else to throw myself into was therapeutic for me.
Do you think that's why you want to share that with so many other people, because it was something that helped you?
Yes. I mean, I feel like books have helped me through so much. Sometimes just the right book at the right time can change your life and make you feel less alone. I think that's part of why I love doing this.
The ones to thank for that, authors.
Authors are such rock stars. I mean, really, they're all, I feel, doing such a service to all of us. They're spending their lives and their time sitting alone, usually, writing to help other people or to produce stories that will transport people and entertain people. And I think they should get their due.
You know, the thing that was so unique is this is not about money for her. She's fortunate in that way, but this is a passion project. She just wants to put books in people's hands and get people reading. And by talking to these authors and getting to know them in the podcast, she's opening people's minds about, oh, I liked that person. Maybe I'll try their book.
Authors are rock stars, and they so often do not get the attention they deserve. So good on anyone bringing them that attention.
Yeah, I know how much Jeff loves to read and read books in particular.
And reading
you were itching. I know you were just itching. You should start a podcast.
There's a couple amazing. I did author talk a few years ago on the website, but I mean, there's a couple of great quotes in there, right? One is reading is fundamental. It is just fundamental to human existence, and writing, she says, is how I sort out my mind.
Yeah.
So many of us do.
Really, really nice, intimate conversation. Thanks, Dana.
Great stuff, Dana.